This is the Watchman's Call. Discern, warn, and prepare. Where we draw the red line, live the red line. Welcome to Red Line Live. It may shock some of you to learn that in 2024, more young Americans indicated a preference for socialism over capitalism, more a matter of lived experience, values, and proximate crisis that will define their futures than a matter of outdated political theory. Indeed, a national poll concluded that a growing percentage of Gen Z and millennials do not think of socialism in terms of state control over the economy, but rather as a system that combines private enterprise with equity, fairness, and strong social protection. This rethink is hand in hand with the climate anxiety wave, economic delusion, and social justice activism. In a 2024 survey of teenagers and young adults aged 15 to 25, 60% are extremely worried about the climate crisis, and more than 40% indicate worry was impacting their mental health. For them, that fear is being converted into direct action, whether to participate in climate protest, to support Extinction Rebellion's nonviolent direct action, which I'm guessing is an organization, or even to host grassroots events such as climate cafes as a means of making the conversation available to everyone. The link of these emotional drivers to political ideology is close. Empirical studies of critical consciousness have found that youth, particularly low income and minority youth, are more likely to take action if they've had exposure to economic struggle, violence in the neighborhood, or institutionalized racism. In one study in Chicago, 82% of teens identified issues tied to inequity and oppression, from police brutality to educational disparity, as the issues most important to them. This consciousness from time to time expresses itself as a call for systematic change. Many see this in terms of socialism. And here is the catch: the socialism they are speaking of is not Karl Marx's. Surveys inform us that American youth routinely describe it as equality, equal status for all, or benefits and services, free social services, medicine for all. That is, it's equity based, highly regulated capitalism and not an outright governmental takeover. That's why some call it a quest for safety capitalism, preserving markets, imagination, and opportunity, but moderating their risks and diffusing more of their benefits. Economic inequality is foremost. Young adults in recent youth politics surveys list cost of living, healthcare, and employment at the forefront of their agendas. Most feel the system is rigged in favor of the rich, and almost all under 30 say that family or good fortune play a larger factor in attaining wealth than hard work. That erodes confidence in capitalism's promise and leads them to alternatives they think could provide everyone with a fair chance. So, this is the issue of the day that we're dealing with. Um, Many of the youth in this country think that they want a socialist president over a uh, Republican or Democrat president, to solve the issues that they feel concern them, right? So I had this video here that I wanted to pull up, and this is by Glenn Beck, and he brings on his coworker and business partner, to talk about these issues and a survey that was done this year. And the questions that they present in it are pretty disturbing to the factor of what I just read to you. And we're gonna listen to this, and I'm gonna comment every now and then and stop it, and then I want to get into a couple of issues uh, more specifically to the housing crisis being one of their main issues that they feel is contributing to their decision. And then also one that I see that is the problem, or one of the main problems with the two younger generations contributing to our own society. So here is the video with Glenn Beck. Let's get into it.
Justin Haskins, he is the president of Our Republic, StoppingSocialism.com. He's the editor-in-chief and also a co-author of several books with me. Welcome to the program, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing well, Glenn. How are you?
Well, I was better until you contacted me on vacation and sent me this disturbing poll. I'm in bed at night and I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, dear, what? My wife's like, I told you not to check your email. And I'm like, I didn't know Justin was going to write to me. Justin, tell me, first of all, before we get into it, how secure is the sample size on this poll?
It's a very good sample size, 1,200 people nationally, only 18 to 39-year-olds. And we did that deliberately so that we could get a sample size large enough so we could pull out valid responses just from younger people. So the whole purpose of this poll is to find out what younger people, 18 to 39, think. Voters only, and people who say that they're likely to vote. So we're not talking about just people out in the public. We're not talking about registered voters. We're talking about people who are registered to vote and say they're likely to vote.
So let's go over some of the things that you have already released to the press. And that is, in the survey, 18, 39-year-old likely voters, the Trump approval rating is a lot higher than you thought it would be, right?
Yeah. 48% had a positive approval rating of Donald Trump, which for young people is very high. So that's the good news. That's the only good news we're going to talk about.
I was going to say, we might have to come back to that first question several times. Do you believe the United States is a fundamentally good, evil, or morally mixed country?
Yep, this one is not too bad. It's not great, but fundamentally good was 28%, which is low, but mixed was 50%. And fundamentally evil was 17%. And I think mixed at 50% is not an unreasonable, crazy response. I can see why all sorts of people might choose that. So I don't think there's anything terrible here. It depends on what you mean by mixed. Fundamentally good at 28%, it's a little low. Fundamentally evil at 17% is a little disturbing, but it's not insane. The insane stuff comes a little bit later.
See, and that's surprising to me because fundamentally evil, I think, would be based off the fact that these younger generations are being educated in our education system to believe that, based off the 1619 Project, that America was founded on racism. So they're already learning that our country is fundamentally evil. So it's they're not even thinking on a moral basis per se, in my opinion, but they're learning a false history, which contributes to that.
Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Major industries, talk about the crazy stuff coming later. Here it is. Major industries like healthcare, energy, and big tech should be nationalized and give more control and equity to the people.
Yeah, this was really, I mean, this one floored me. If you look at strongly agree, somewhat agree for that statement you just read, it's over 75% of young people, including the vast majority of Republicans, young Republicans, and people who identify as conservatives. It was pretty similar, in fact, how young Republicans responded compared to liberals and independents and Democrats. They all pretty much agreed that, yes, the federal government should be nationalizing whole industries to make things more equitable for people.
As the guy who is the chief editor-in-chief of Stopping Socialism, what's the problem with nationalizing energy and healthcare?
Well,
what happens typically?
Well, usually there's blood in the streets when you do too much of that. Socialism, communism have been spectacularly horrible throughout the course of human history across every society, culture, religion. It doesn't matter when or what kind of technological advancements you have. The more you collectivize a society, the more authoritarian that society gets, the less you have individual freedom, and the worse the economy usually is for regular people.
See, and actually, America's government is at risk of being that very thing too, because it's a totalitarianism or an authoritarianism mindset where he's talking about being centralized, which our government is becoming. Um, and they do an overreach on their policies, right? So that's why he's talking about if any of this type of thing gets implemented, then their overreach would extend to too far reaching and cause people to be at each other's throats, and therefore you end up with blood in the streets. I don't even think it necessarily needs to go to a complete socialistic government, because we're already experiencing big government here in our country. And um, the Democrats even made it bigger when they were in, and that's what can contribute to it because they centralize a lot of this stuff. So let's keep
It's
watching.
been a catastrophe across the board. Everyone listening to this audience probably knows that. And so the idea that you would have 3/4 of young voters. So remember, these people are going to be the primary voters in 10 to 20 years, saying, yeah, you know what, we should be nationalizing whole industries, whole industries, is so disturbing. And
that just blows my mind too. So one of their issues is that they don't trust these corporations with all of this money. They think that it's going to solve the problem by nationalizing um, the policy, right, and letting the government handle it. Instead, you're still stuck in an oligarchy where these corporations are involved with the government still, and they're being monetized by the government instead of being self-funded. You're not getting rid of the problem, you're just transferring the way the money is put in. But these elite leaders in these organizations will still contribute in the same way, in my opinion. So let's keep watching.
That conservatives understand how deeply rooted some of these ideas are with younger people.
And I will tell you, I think some conservatives are walking a very dangerous line, and coming up with a little mix of everything. And I think we have to be very careful on what is being said and who our friends and allies are. By the way, that number again is 39% strongly agree, 37% somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, 12% strongly disagree, 5%. That is disastrous. Now try this one on. These are the ones that have been, we got new ones. These are just a few of the ones that were released late last week. The next presidential election is in 2028. Would you like to see a Democratic Socialist candidate win the 2028 presidential election?
Yep, 53% said yes. 53% of all voters said yes. And the most shocking thing was that 35% of those who we polled who said they voted for Donald Trump in 2024 said that they want to see a socialist win in 2028. And so about a third of Republicans, 35% of Trump.
See, they really believe that Trump, the reason they voted for him, that Trump, because he wasn't a politician, that he was going to burn it all down, because that's what they want. They want this type of government that we have to go away and then re-implemented the way that they see
voters, 43% of people who call themselves conservatives. So even on the right, among younger people, there is a large group that want a socialist president in 2028.
And the reason is it tied into the next few questions. Okay, so here's question 5. Among the following options, which best describes your biggest reason you would like to see a Democratic Socialist candidate? 31% said housing costs are too high. 12% taxes are too low for corporations. 11% taxes are too low for wealthy individuals. 8% want single-payer healthcare systems. 17% say the economy unfairly benefits older, wealthier Americans. 15% says the economy unfairly benefits large corporations. 5% some other reason, and 2% unsure. Now, let's get into the new polls that we're breaking today. Question 6. How would you describe your current financial situation?
Yeah, only 24% said that they're doing well. 38% said getting by, struggling 29%. 7% said in crisis. So if you add up just getting by, struggling, and in crisis, that's 74% said that they're, just barely getting by at best. And I think that explains a lot of the other negative responses we've seen so far in this poll and the ones that are going to come pretty soon here.
7, which best describes your personal life situation? You are thriving. Yeah. You're doing well with a few ups and downs. You feel stuck and uncertain. You feel lonely, disconnected, or emotionally drained. You're in a crisis and feel most negative about your personal life.
Yeah, about a third said that they feel stuck or uncertain, lonely, or that they're in a crisis. That's a third of young people say that. I mean, that's not great. Only 19% said thriving. 46% said they have ups and downs, which I think is, not too shocking. But the idea that there's a third of American voters out there who feel like they can't buy a home and they feel like they are lonely and that they're in crisis and that life is just not going well at all for them. Again, I think that's driving a lot of the support for socialism when you have 53% of these people saying, yeah, I want a socialist president in 2028.
So socialism is not the answer. It is the symptom. It's the symptom of what people are feeling right now. And they don't know any other, nobody's presenting them with anything other than, Republican, Democrat bullcrap. And socialists are coming at it from a completely new angle, or so the youth think. It's the oldest and most failed system of all time.
See, and they're just trying to recreate it because they think that they can implement socialism in a new way that contributes to how they believe and still have a capitalist element to it, right? But the biggest issue to them, obviously, listening to this is the housing crisis, and they feel like they need a real solution to that. So I believe that we can, if we present a solution to the youth, and not even directly, but indirectly, we can come up with a solution. And we have one currently, if we look at other countries, by looking at Javier Milei down there in Argentina, who has taken away rent control completely out of their system and allowed the free market to flow. It didn't work right away, but after about a year, they started to see housing costs drop significantly. So I think if we were to implement the same type of thing state by state here, we could actually see a booming housing market once again and affordability for the youth in our nation.
But they're seeing this as a solution that is different than what the party, the Republican Democrats are offering, even though the Democrats are offering the socialism thing. Number 8, do you think the American economy is unfair to young people? 62% say yes.
Yeah, and 27% said no. And I think that this really gets at the heart of what the issue is here. When you look at the reasons, when you look at the detailed data of the poll, to try to find out if there's an association between some kind of demographic or response question about people's lives and their support for socialism to see if there's a correlation there between something that's happening and whether someone's a socialist or not. One of the top correlations, connections, is if people think the economy is unfair and if they're having trouble buying a home or they don't think they can buy a home, or that's one of their reasons for supporting socialism. So in other words, there's this fairness issue. And if it's not even about inequality, it's not about, well, they have too much wealth. If they feel like the system is, to use a Trump term, rigged. And throughout the data, that's what we see over and over and over again, is lots of young people say the economy is rigged. For older people, for wealthier people, for corporations, it's rigged. And if they say, yeah, I think it's rigged, then they're more likely to say, yeah, I want a socialist. And I also think this is why the same group has a relatively high approval rating of Donald Trump. It's because the reason that a lot of young people like Trump in the poll is that he's not part of the establishment.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
I think a lot of young people who voted for Trump and who like Trump, they didn't do it because they like free market, pro-liberty policies. And that's not a good thing. But I don't think that's why they did it. I think a lot of them voted for Trump and support him because he's not the establishment. And that's what they don't like. They want to blow the establishment up.
Justin, my sample size is my two young adults, my two children. And they're like talking to me and saying, Dad, I will never be able to own a home, looking at the prices, looking at interest rates. They're like, I can't even afford to pay rent at an apartment. Mm-hmm. And they don't know what to do. And so they're looking at on like TikTok and they're like, who's this Mom Donmi guy? This sounds interesting. They bring this to me. Yep. They grew up listening to me and indoctrinating them their entire lives. They're looking at other voices like on TikTok. Are we just not being loud enough?
No, we're not connecting. I feel like
this is also about education. So I want to pause it here and I want to get in a little bit deeper to this housing crisis bit, because I think it's really important to recognize the survey this survey data that I got here came out this year. Surprising findings on home ownership by generation. The world has changed in unimaginable ways from the time the oldest baby boomers were born in the late 1940s to the 21st century birth dates of Gen Z. From the end of the Cold War and 9/11 to the advent of the internet and social media. The fast-changing last few decades have undoubtedly let unique marks on those who grew up during them. Americans of all ages seem to prize one fundamental goal, however, owning their homes. Roughly 9 out of 10 boomers, 90%, Gen Xers at 90%, and millennials at 89% still believe owning a home is part of the American dream. 2/3 of those who don't own homes is part of the American 2/3 of those who don't own a home, 67%, including 84% of millennials, want to own one someday. Nevertheless, 3/4 or more of each group, 80% of millennials, 77% of Gen X, and 75% of boomers, also say home ownership is not affordable for the coverage, just like they were saying there. For the coverage with different generations. Nevertheless, 3/4 or more of each group also say is not affordable for the average American, with different generations blaming differing factors, including one another. There are also some noteworthy differences in what's holding back non-owners of each generation and what they'd be willing to do to achieve this milestone. They did a survey of 1,000 Americans across generations about their views on home ownership, what they're looking for in a property, and how they view their age groups. Nearly half, 44%, own their home outright, while another 28% own with a mortgage. Another quarter, 23%, are renting an apartment or house, with the rest, 5%, in some other kind of housing situation. So, like I imagine a lot of the boomers and maybe even some of Gen Xers they own their homes outright, right? So they'll probably hand that out generationally. Um, when the older generation start passing off, which we're seeing some of that now with the boomers. So that's one of the other kind of housing situation, right? Approximately 90% of Americans say owning a home is part of the American dream, bested only by access to quality health care at 91%, a comfortable retirement at 91%, and freedom of speech and expression at 92%. When asked to rank 10 major life goals, the average American says owning a home is more important than having a job they love, having a comfortable retirement, or being married and having children. Consistent numbers across generations agree that the U.S. is facing an affordable housing crisis. 80% of both boomers and millennials, and 79% of Gen Xers, and that owning a home is not affordable for the average American. 80% of millennials, 77% of Gen X, and 75% of boomers. Affordability is the top factor when buying a home for millennials, 44%, and Gen X, 46%, but it's tied with location among boomers at 42% each. More than twice as many millennials, 12%, than boomers, 5%, say the smallest home they consider buying is a tiny house under 600 square feet. Isn't that just something, though? We've so caused the inflation of our housing in single family homes now that what used to cost a single, what it used to cost to buy a single family home was, 150,000 dollars for, I don't know, let's say a 2,000 square foot home, right? Maybe up to that 1,500 square feet. I don't know. This seems a little unreasonable to me to go that high, but now, and I just went to one of these lots the other day where there's these tiny homes, and you can buy a tiny home, but you're looking at, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 square feet, and you're going to pay anywhere from 50,000 to $100,000 for that least amount of room, and they call that downsizing, right? That's just crazy to think about. And in these single family homes are now 2 and 3 times that much, which is, I mean, even for me, where I've grown up and I've gotten a good paying job and everything, that I can't even afford that kind of home, because you're looking where banks don't even allow a 10% down payment anymore. You got to pay 20%, right? And so you're looking at 40, $50,000 down payment for a single family home with some significant square footage compared to what it used to be. It's just getting ridiculous. And I understand how they feel. Unfortunately, there's some other factors here that do contribute to the fact that they uh, can no longer afford a place like back in the day, but they're unwilling to do some things to be able to do so, in my opinion. However, over twice as many millennials, 8%, than boomers, 3%, also say the smallest home they consider buying is a large one over 2,500 square feet, indicating both more flexibly and higher standards among this generation. So they want the 2,500 square foot home, but I don't know about you, that's not even practical to think about. In fact, I got one on the market right now. It's been on the market for 90 days. It's only 1,400 square feet and it's worth $300,000. And I bought it for 140. So that just tells you how far things have got inflated because of uh, what the government has done to the market. It's just insane. Almost a third of respondents, 31%, blame millennials most for the current affordable housing crisis, just ahead of boomers at 27%. Millennials and boomers, however, are more likely to blame one another than their own generation. Nevertheless, three-quarters of respondents, 76%, also believe millennials and Gen Z are the biggest victims of the current housing crisis. I mean, I got a 25-year-old daughter who's just newly married. I know for a fact that she's not going to be able to afford that, even with both of them um, having jobs, because the minimum wage does not accommodate for owning a home these days. Although I do believe that being in a marriage and bringing in income from both sides is an important factor for being able to afford a home, rather than being single and working several jobs and trying to do it on your own, that contributes to not having to work so hard and still be able to access your dreams here in America. Two-thirds of Americans, 66%, believe boomers are the most financially responsible generation when it comes to home ownership, while over half, 57%, believe Gen Z owners are the least financially responsible. About 60% of millennial non-owners are optimistic about owning a home in the future, far higher than the 38% of boomers who feel this way. Over half of millennial and Gen X non-owners, 52% each, say owning a home is their biggest goal in life, nearly double the number of boomer renters, 27%, who say the same. And I think that's honestly, it's probably across the board, because that was, my biggest goal too, even though I wasn't able to accomplish that till I was 39 years old. Nearly 6%, as many boomers non-owners, say they never want to own, compared to millennials, 34% versus 6%, respectively. Although only 52% of non-owners say they prefer renting as one of the reasons they don't own, that number rises to 66% among boomers. Only 1 in 5 boomer non-owners, 21%, feels embarrassed about not yet owning, half the number of millennials who say the same at 42%. Just 7% of boomer renters, 6% of Gen X renters, and essentially no millennials say they could put down $75,000 or more for a home purchase. I mean, for that fact of the matter, 40 or 50,000 is almost impossible to come by unless you know how to save, and you do it over, 3 to 5 years. Probably it would take you, depending on what you make and how you have learned to save. The only thing that makes it different for a person like me is like I said, my home being up on the market and I've built equity in it, then I have the money through equity to be able to put down on a new place, which isn't normal for some, obviously a non-owner. The number one reasons boomers say they can't afford a home is because they wouldn't be able to afford maintenance and repairs. Only 25% of millennials feel this way. Meanwhile, 22% of millennials can't afford a home because of their student debt, more than 7 times the number of boomers at 3%. When asked about 20 various sacrifices they might make to be able to own a home, ranging from taking a second job to moving to a less desirable area to finding a sugar daddy or a mommy, none had a majority of respondents willing to do them. However, for every surveyed sacrifice, millennials were 2 times to 5 times more willing than boomers to do so. That's funny that they had to find sugar daddies and sugar mommies in order to take care of them, because that would be the easy way, right? But they've grown up in this society now that these younger generations, these two young ones, the younger ones in specific, don't believe in marriage because of the things that they've been taught. Pretty crazy. Despite affordability challenges, Americans continue to believe that owning a home is a core part of the American dream. There's no generation gap at all when it comes to those who selected owning a home, with all generations within a percentage point of the total. There's also no major difference between homeowners, 91%, and non-owners at 86%, when it comes to those who say, oh, home ownership is a part of the American dream. For many, owning a home may be the single most important part of the American dream. When asked to rank a series of milestones in order of their importance from the most 1 to the least 10, it averaged the lowest, 4.5. It's the most important across all generations analyzed. Owning a home is more important to average Americans than having a job they love, having a comfortable retirement, or being married and having children, like I read earlier. No matter their age, there's one thing respondents are almost unanimous about. Home prices nationwide are too expensive right now. About 93% of boomers say so, along with 92% of Gen Xers and 92% of millennials. Even more troubling, just 35% of millennials, 46% of Gen Xers, and 47% of boomers think owning a home is even attainable for the typical American, just like I was explaining. Even on sometimes contentious issues such as building affordable housing in their own neighborhood, there's only a 6-point gap in support between millennials and Gen X, 70% each, and boomers, 68%. However, there's a much more significant difference among generations when asked if they'd be willing to pay more in taxes for government to take action on housing affordability. Just 1 in 5 boomers at 21%, and 1 in 4 Gen Xers at 25%, compared to 39% of millennials. But the same token, by the same token, 87% of millennials think government policies should do more to take home ownership accessibility substantially higher than the 75% of boomers and 78% of Gen Xers who feel this way. And that's how they feel about it. But the truth is, it's our governments who are doing this, even in states that take our single family homes. And I'm a proponent of this because my daily work, I get to see this every day, where they're now tearing down single family homes to put up multifamily units. And because of the multifamily units, especially in metropolitan areas, it really, other than inflation, it really drives up the price of single family homes, making it unaffordable. So the one solution I think that we can attribute to and even implement here in our government is what I believe Javier Milei is doing in Argentina. But here, let's go back to Glenn's video and we'll finish up what he has to say, and then we'll move on to some more.
We are speaking to them in red, white, and blue, and that means nothing. The Statue of Liberty means nothing to them. Ellis Island means nothing to them. The flag means nothing to them. It's all partisan politics. They're all symbols of really the two parties, and in America, they don't relate to at all. I think that's our biggest problem in not being able to break through. To your point, question 9, how confident are you that you will own a home at some point in the next 10 years? 29% say they already own a home, which I found.
Wait, what? 29% of our youth, 18 to 39, already own a home? I didn't get mine till, like I said, till 39, and it took me, I don't even know how long, almost an entire year to raise 10,000. That's what I was able to use as a down payment through a state program in order to get mine. But again, I didn't get it until I was 39. Maybe there's some hand-me-downs there, or we got wealthy parents who handed them some money in order to be able to buy their first home. Who knows? Some state programs have the availability, I guess, maybe to contribute to that type of thing. But wow, that's actually a bigger number than I would have imagined, considering this is one of the crises that they're explaining they feel pretty adamant about for wanting a socialist president, right? Let's watch.
Interesting. That's I think a pretty high number for somebody who was 18 to 34 years old.
39.
There's a lot of 18 to 30 that I didn't own a home when I was 30. Just had gotten a home when I was 30. But go ahead with the rest of that poll.
Yeah, so then 21% said discouraged, but somewhat hopeful. 12% said not confident. 10% said you were convinced you would never own a home. 3% not sure. So if you add up the negative responses, it's around 43% that gave that response. But I think that
again, 29% you already own a home, and 25% you're confident you will own a home is still good. It just these other numbers have discouraged but hopeful.
Well, if they're all going to go for 2,500 square foot homes, I think that's probably a little unrealistic, but that's just my opinion.
You'll own a home. Who's discouraging that? And how is that being discouraged? Only 12, 22, 25% are not sure they're ever going to own a home. That's too high of a number, but I don't think that's completely dismal. Now, a completely dismal answer to the question, would you support a law that would confiscate America's excess wealth, including things like second homes, luxury cars, and private boats in order to help young people buy a home for the first time?
See, and we're going to get into this here next, because I think this is one of the contributing factors to the fact that they are not willing to not work to the extent that our us older generations have in order to earn the money to reach those goals. But you'll see that here in a second, and Glenn continues to talk about this here.
Are you for or against that? There's some disturbing results. They get very disturbing going from here on. We got 2 of these today and then more tomorrow. We'll spend more time with you tomorrow, Justin. But would you support a law that would confiscate Americans' excess wealth, including things like second home, luxury cars, and private boats in order to help young people buy a home for the first time? Give the results.
Yeah, 25% strongly support that. 30% somewhat support it. So 55% in total for support. Only 38% strongly or somewhat opposed, with just 20% saying strongly opposed. So the vast majority now is supporting this communistic policy to confiscate people's wealth in order to help people, younger people, buy homes, which is in line with that question that we talked about earlier, where it said, 3/4 of these respondents wanted to nationalize whole industries to make things fairer. So it's all about this sense of unfairness that exists.
Uh-huh.
And they feel like, young people feel like the system is rigged. They feel like neither party is on their side, and they want to blow the whole thing up by just taking wealth away from people, nationalizing whole industries, and redistributing.
See, this isn't just a result of fairness. This is also a result of technology, where they're completely distracted from being able to do the things and accomplish the things that we did in the older generation. So now, instead of them wanting to earn it or work for it in order to get it, they want to pass this on as a responsibility for those that actually have earned it in the past, in order that they might be able to have it, right? So that's they think they're recreating socialism, but that actually is socialism. It's pretty disturbing.
It all. And guess what? That's basically the Democratic Socialist platform. So it's not a surprise that that's becoming increasingly more popular with these young people. And I don't think that free market, pro-liberty people are dealing with this in a real way. In fact, I think that a lot of us have believed recently that the wind is at our backs and we're actually winning more and more young people over. And that isn't what's happening, according to the poll results.
It explains why the Democrats have not moved their position off of the socialism stuff, doesn't it?
Yes,
we
it
keep
does.
saying why it's not working with anybody. It is working. It is working with people under 39. 18 to 39-year-olds are hearing this message and are embracing this message.
See, and it's not just the fact that they're hearing it, they're also being taught it, because one of the things that is happening in our education system is, instead of them teaching the young people how to to be in these classes and learn how to live their life as a grown-up, they're now teaching them to be social justice warriors. But I want to get into this next article. It says, are Gen Z workers quiet quitters? And I think this is one of the things that really contributes to the fact that they are unwilling to actually step up and do the things we did in the older generations. So Gen Z is the generation born between 1997 and 2012. According to CNBC, when it comes to workplace engagement, Gen Z, like millennials, have been criticized for their workplace habits. Gen Z are accused of being too casual in professional settings and have been declared the most challenging generation to work with. Millennials have been scrutinized for years, being called everything from the job hopping generation for quitting jobs frequently to the tethered generation for an over reliance on their parents. Hello. Part of this is the parents' job too, right? Like we become too lackadaisical with our children, and that has contributed as well, in my opinion. Uh, Characteristics of quiet quitters. I have previously um, blogged about the concept of quiet quitting. It does not mean that employees outright quit their job. While employees do not stop performing their duties, they quit the idea of going above and beyond. They no longer describe or subscribe to the hustle culture mentality that work but must be first in our lives. That work must be first in our lives. Yeah. That's some of the mentality that I grew up with. Millennial and Gen Z workers are at the forefront of the movement. Baby boomers and Generation X workers are older and less likely to leave their jobs. Gen Z is driving the trend with a higher percentage leaving jobs without another to go to. According to a study by Gallup, quiet quitters make up at least 50% of the US workforce. Many quiet quitters fit its definition of being non engaged at work, people who do the minimum required and are psychologically detached from their job. Gee, I wonder why that is, right? Like I was talking about earlier with the technology and being distracted, that's exactly what they want to do. Gallup found a decline in engagement and employee satisfaction among remote Gen Z and younger millennials, those below age 35. So there's another contributing factor. So you think about the back in 2019 and 2020 where COVID came in and a lot of these jobs went remote, and these they filled these positions where they work from home, and to me that would be actually harder to concentrate on actually doing your job if you ended up remote than being in an actual workplace, right? According to research by LLC, when quiet quitters decide to do the bare minimum in their roles, they're often pushing some of their responsibilities off on others. Oh, just like what they want with the housing crisis, right? They want to take from us who have actually earned it, and the extra above and beyond the toys that we have, and sell them off so that they can buy their first home. Wow, that's crazy. Whether they realize it or not. Naturally, that isn't going to go over well with some of the quiet quitters colleagues. Yeah, like me. In the LLC report, 62% of employees surveyed said they are annoyed by the trend of quiet quitting, with 57% stating that they had to take on extra work because a colleague had quietly quit. The following signs of quiet quitting illustrate why this trend could be dangerous for employers. Taken to an extreme, it could bring into question one's work life balance and wellness, and negatively affect the workplace culture. You think? Disengagement on a chronic basis, performance only to the minimum set of performance standards, isolation from other members of the team, withdrawal from any non necessary conversations, activities, or tasks, attendance at meetings, but not speaking up or taking action. That reminds me, my girlfriend manages three different offices. And one of the things I notice when she comes home and we talk about it is that very thing. Millennials that she has working in the job place don't like to fulfill their job duties, and they're distracted, and they make excuses all the time for not doing them, and they call in sick all the time. I mean, this is one major contributing factor to the fact that they are feeling the way that they are and feel lonely out there in the world and not being able to accomplish the things that we used to, right? What is resenteeism? Resenteeism is a combination of resentment and absenteeism. It's a growing trend where employees continue working in roles they find dissatisfying because they either can't find a better suited job or think they won't be able to. It's an evolved version of quiet quitting in the age of mass layoffs. Not only are employees disengaged, but they are resentful about it. Quiet quitting was about working on autopilot to reduce stress. Resenteeism is about feeling trapped in your role. The idea that you have employees in your business phoning it in resentfully falls high on the list of things that keep leaders worry about. That keep leaders worry about. I think that's worded wrong. At the core of both quiet quitting and resenteeism are common themes: burnout, feeling undervalued, and feeling unfulfilled. According to the CNBC survey, Gen Z workers are the least enthusiastic about their roles at work. Business leaders need to understand the rise of resenteeism, a trend that first gained momentum in TikTok. Didn't that guy just say something about they look to TikTok for other voices because they don't like the going trends, right? Conservatism, free market. So they're looking to Mom Donnie over there in New York. Crazy. Workplace enthusiasm. The differences in workplace enthusiasm across generations are stunning. According to the CNBC survey, a staggering 47% of Gen Z respondents to the survey say they are coasting by at work, with only 40% saying they are thriving. This is the opposite of all older generations, in which a higher proportion claim they are thriving in their roles. The younger generation is almost likely to say they are just working for a paycheck at 42%, while older generations are more likely to say they are fired up about their jobs. In addition to I've been at mine for 20 years, so I mean, I'm comfortable where I'm at. I've worked hard to get where I'm at to make what I make. In addition to feeling the least engaged in work, Gen Z also finds their responsibilities uninspiring. In the survey, Gen Z workers report having the least meaningful work at 14% and least autonomy at work at 21%. Wait a minute. So there's some of the ones that occupied these remote jobs, but they've got least autonomy. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense compared to other generations who are more fulfilled and have more autonomy. I haven't seen as many remote jobs as I've heard about during the time of, COVID. That's crazy. It's important to recognize that Gen Z workers are often the youngest and least experienced employees and are given entry level work that may feel less fulfilling than managerial or executive responsibilities. Well, you have to fulfill your work in order to get there. You don't just That's not just something that's handed to you. Dissatisfaction with entry level work has been a theme for many years, according to CNBC. In their inaugural workforce survey 7 years ago, during the time of COVID, right? 2019, workers 18 to 24 and 25 to 34 both reported having the least amount of control over their work tasks. All older age groups reported having more control, presumably because as workers get older, they are promoted into roles with more responsibilities. I don't know that older has anything to do with it. You progress in your workplace by doing a good job, and therefore you get promoted. Wow. Workplace ambition. The survey reports an important finding with regards to workplace ambition. Gen Z, the least engaged generation, exhibits some positive signs. Gen Z workers are ambitious, with the overwhelming majority at 92% saying they value engaging work. This finding reflects what I have observed about Gen Z workers. They want more responsibilities, leadership positions, training, and challenges in the workplace. In the survey, and I don't know, we've been over this a lot, even in politics, and they've had to take away these DEI policies because they're not based on merit. You don't actually earn your position. They just want the position so that they can have more power. That's just crazy to me. Um, building enthusiasm. Wait, in the survey, Gen Z workers reported several reasonable ways to find workplace motivation, and it's not just higher pay, although it is a compelling factor for all generations. They also report wanting more autonomy, 24%, and more connection with colleagues, 25%, at a higher rate than millennials or Gen X. So let me get this straight. Your employer now has to not just hire you, but accommodate you and find a better way for you to connect with your fellow employees? I don't think so. Building enthusiasm. How can employers prevent resenteeism from becoming a widespread phenomenon? Writing for CNBC, Eric Johnson suggests that they should build an enthusiasm on the enthusiasm of Gen Z by first offering employees more meaningful opportunities to connect with coworkers. This is especially important in our new hybrid world. It's no surprise that the generation that entered the workforce during the pandemic hybrid work era would desire more opportunities to know their colleagues beyond a computer screen. It is up to leaders to mold workplace experiences in a way that is appealing to Gen Z without taking away what works with respect to work product of millennials and earlier work groups. Leaders should do what is necessary to give employees more ownership of their work, as the CNBC survey suggests, by creating an environment where everyone can feel like a decision maker. Employees will feel more invested in their work. By dealing with these issues early, business leaders can develop a workforce that is happier and more productive, boosting the bottom line while increasing the retention. I'm going to end it there because that's all ridiculous. So it's the employer's responsibility to make a millennial or a Gen Z employee more comfortable to do their work instead of that person having responsibility over their own autonomy. But they want more autonomy. Go figure on that one. So, yeah, as I close this up here, I think the one main solution I think we could come up with on a universal aspect would be the housing thing, and to implement that into not just our federal government but statewide. And I think one of the bigger things that we just had happen in our nation is the death of Charlie Kirk, and that TPUSA is now expanding, and it's now gone to 64,500 registrations for new campus organizations, right? On colleges and in high school. And I think one of the ways that we can engage in our local municipalities, I know here in my county, we've already talked about the fact, and we've had the leader of a local high school, or a couple high school TPUSA organizations has come forward and said, they lost they lost activity in young students being involved in TPUSA until the Charlie Kirk thing happened. Now it's blown up, but overall, they've still needed support in the school because they've been ridiculed and stuff. So if we engage on the school level with these kids and we start to do the things that Charlie was doing and telling them about how good the free market and conservatism and coming to Jesus would be for not just you as an individual, but for our nation, this would also contribute to the healing of our nation. And I think the fact that his organization was called Turning Point is huge for that fact of the matter, because I think those are two of the main ways that we can get involved and try to quell this problem of the younger generations wanting to pick out a socialist president this next time around. But we got a lot of work to do, people, and we need to get busy. We need more voices. It's expanding exponentially, which is great, but it's still going to be a lot of work. These generations 18 to 39, right? So that's a lot of years exposed to a corrupt government and a corrupt education system. So it's going to take a lot to overcome that, but I think because of the dramatic events that we're faced with as a nation now, some of those things are definitely turning. And I think we're out of time here. So that's about all I got. That's my 2 cents. Thanks for joining me today. Make sure you share. Give me a thumbs up on any of the social media that you find me on here, and leave a chat in the comment, or a comment in the chat. I said that backwards. Comment in the chat. Let me know what you think about this if you liked it today. And thanks for joining me again, and we'll see you next time. Catch you later.